we just heard that from Alex. I think that was a really great way to set the scene for what's going to be a fascinating panel with lots of tips, I hope, from our panellists here. So let me tell you who else has joined us here on stage. So first of all, do we have Andrea? Is she joining us remotely? We'll come back to that in just 1 second. So Emmanuel Asuquo. So you're a financial advisor and you dispense financial advice both via your website, so they're clearly digitally savvy, so onestopsave.com, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And also on TV. So this format is very familiar to you. You're happy being in the limelight.
I'm amongst friends.
Excellent, so very welcome indeed. And next we have Liz Barclay, the Small Business Commissioner, which since being established in 2016 has helped small businesses get back more than, there might be a more up-to-date figure, but £8 million
Up a bit.
in unpaid invoices, which is incredible work and really important stuff. And Richard Bearman, just checking you're still awake, Managing Director of the British Business Bank. And now, by the power of technology, we are also joined by Andrea Reynolds, who's founder and CEO of Swoop, and apparently affectionately known amongst colleagues as the Martin Lewis of business finance. Is that right, Andrea?
Yes, I'm a huge champion for small and medium business across everything from accessing finance, removing all the barriers to access to finance, to also surfacing cost savings for businesses. So small and medium enterprises are the most overcharged and underserved customer segment. Providers are banking on you being too busy to understand how much you're being overcharged. So we utilize your data, like your Xero data, to surface those cost savings for you. So yes, always championing how we can save money for our businesses.
Super. Thank you very much for that, Andrea. So, Liz, I'd like to come to you first, because I think what's really important to do in the context of late payments is to get a real kind of sense of how it affects business owners, right? Because it's not just about the bank balance. Like, I've written features talking to business owners where they've been kept awake at night, they've had suicidal thoughts. Like, this is really important stuff, and it has an impact on entrepreneurs' mental health, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I would put that at the top. Alex talked about how busy business owners are. Mm-hmm. And if you're spending 3.5 hours a week chasing unpaid invoices, for instance, and you don't know when money that is due is going to hit your bank account. You don't know if you can recruit, if you can invest, if you can grow the business, your productivity's down, you're worrying about whether or not you're going to have the money to pay the wages, and that keeps you awake at night. Mm-hmm. And I have, throughout all of my career until I took this job, have been either freelance or run my own business, and so I do know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. And you are awake, and if you're awake worrying, that really affects your mental health. Yeah. So it's not just the economy we're talking about here. This is lives we're talking about. And it's the lives of the small business owners, it's the lives of the small business owners' employees, and it's all the families who are involved. And I have seen the impact of small businesses losing not just the business, but the home. And that was a long time ago when I first really got involved with small businesses, other than my home setup and my own business, and realized that we have got to do something to make sure that the small businesses, which are the most valuable in the UK, are supported at the times they need the support, with the right support for the right stage in their business. And it's not just about payments, but payments makes a huge difference. If you've got that confidence, you know when it's going to hit the bank account, you can do an awful lot more with your business. The government wants growth, it wants increased productivity. This is the place to start. Mm-hmm.
And so, Emma, does that chime with what you hear from business owners as well, that kind of real-life impacts? And I hear from business owners telling me it affects their families. You know, they're looking at their kids, wondering if they're going to be able to put food on the table.
Yeah, definitely. I think we have to understand that we live in a society that works on a month-to-month basis, but as self-employed people, once you become self-employed, you can't guarantee that you're going to get paid month to month. And so what happens is that, you know, I speak to business owners who maybe have a good year when you look at it on paper, but because the money has taken so long to come, by the time it comes, they're paying previous months, they're paying charges, late fees, because the money's taken so long to get there, that they actually don't get to experience the money that they're actually making, number one. But also, how do you then get a mortgage? So when I sit down with clients and talk about mortgage planning and trying to actually buy a house and do things that people who are employed can do quite easily, and it's quite easy to get a mortgage and so forth if you're employed. When you become self-employed, it becomes very difficult. So payments are very important to a business, including then when you want to employ someone, because then it becomes an even additional pressure, because now it's one thing when you're only paying yourself, but when you now have other staff that you have to pay for, you almost put them before yourself, and if they don't get paid on time, then you can then lose good talent because you can't pay people on time to bigger companies. So it really is important.
And I'd just be interested to know in the room here, by a show of hands, for how many of you is late payments an issue? Yeah, so probably, yeah, at least a third. So what are some of the steps that we can put in place in the first place, Alex, to make sure this doesn't happen? Because it comes back to what you were saying earlier about digitalization, at least in parts, right?
Digitalization can help, and there's no question that technology will do several things. One, technology will hopefully help you be on top of your numbers more. And just the visibility of where your business is at is critical. Technology can help you make your invoicing process more efficient. Technology can help you make sure that you know when the money is coming in. You can chase invoices. You can have pay now buttons, et cetera, Hannah. And just this morning, right, I was coming here and I got an invoice in a PDF with a sort code, but there was no pay now button. Look, hopefully I'll remember this afternoon, I'll pay. But I may forget, it'll be a week, right? So there's a lot technology can do. I think the challenge here is the second part, which is the culture of, I don't care about paying on time. The culture of larger companies either not realizing, or even worse, not caring about the consequences of letting a payment drag on.
And is that because often they see it as a kind of faceless business rather than a business with employees, with a founder at the heart of it?
There's definitely that. I think there's just a complete lack of awareness and intimacy of the level of impact that Liz just described. But also, let's be honest, many companies, and we've always advocated for the fact we shouldn't call it late payments, we should call it unapproved debt. Many larger companies are purposefully living and economically drawing a benefit from paying late. And that should be unacceptable. And we've always been big champions or fans of giving Liz a much, much bigger stick so she could
I can see she'd be
passing the buck.
Andrea, I want to come to you next. I know you wanted to add something, Liz.
Yeah, I wanted to say it's not just about late payments. We're talking about late as in overdue invoices, but it's also about the culture that says it's okay to come along and offer your small suppliers an extended payment term in the contract. I'm going to pay you in 120 days. What? You wouldn't pay your employees in 120 days. And somebody said to me this morning that he had, in the past, paid in 30 days, things had got tough, paid in 60 on a take it or leave it basis. But now, because he has really looked into the processes and the impact, etc., he is now pulling back from that and really looking at the processes. Because small businesses will not push back and say, I can't be paid in 120 days because they're scared of losing the work.
Yeah.
So we must, that fear factor for small businesses is huge, but most CFOs and most CEOs, Alex, have never run a small business. They don't know that.
Exactly. Andrea, I'd like to come to you next. So it's also about relationships, isn't it? I think we've talked a bit about kind of the digital tools. We've talked a bit about the payment terms themselves, but it's also about those kind of personal relationships that you form with your suppliers, isn't it? And kind of giving them a call and reminding them that their invoice is overdue.
Yeah, I would pick up on that point because I, being a business owner, would say I myself have been guilty of the fear factor. It's a very personal thing. You're trying to put your best face forward when you are dealing with customers to say you're a strong, financially viable business, that they can do business with you. And then you feel like if you're chasing invoices, that might come across the wrong way, as we were just saying, that you sometimes accept it. I do, like, my own personal experience is that I do think when you use technology, like the Pay Now button, like the reminders, the automated reminders that you can set up in your accounting software, etc., those things actually take a little bit of the psychological edge away from it, where you're not thinking, oh, it's me personally chasing this business. So I think that's a big part of it in terms of us all getting a bit more disciplined on looking at shorter payment terms. I would say the larger the organization, and again, this is from my own experience, the larger the businesses, even public sector bodies, are the hardest to get to pay on time. So I think there's more work and more pressure we need to be putting on those organizations, because they come up with things like, well, this is just our systems. This is our procurement policy. You have to be approved. We only do payments on these particular days. So I think there's a lot of improvement to be done there. But I would say to anyone who is afraid of that first step of chasing invoices, use technology, there's no excuse if there's a Pay Now button. There's no excuse if you're receiving an automated reminder and it's not you as a business owner personally chasing. So, and also the other trick that we all use is the good cop, bad cop. Having the scary finance person, so you can go and build a relationship and continue that relationship and say, finance is chasing me. I'm sorry, I've tried, but finance is chasing me. I think those types of tips genuinely work.
Yeah, some great tips there. Thank you, Andrea. So, Richard, I would like to come to you next. So, what do you see? What impact can it have on a company's finances? Will they then often go to their bank to help them kind of shore up their finances when they've had a succession of late payments? And is it something that you take into account?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a factor. So obviously, well, British Business Bank, we're obviously funding small businesses, and we obviously want to get our money back.
Yeah.
And the key factor of that is those businesses be able to get paid themselves to sort of support their business, grow their business, but also hopefully pay us back. And we do. In startup loans, so we have a startup loan product. You will regularly see people coming, and it's not that they need a startup necessarily to start the business or to grow the business. It's because they've just got this cash flow issue of late payments. I think there's sort of a few things that you see along the way is absolutely there's a culture issue, which I think Liz is definitely championing on that. But also, yes, the big businesses are clearly one of the most difficult areas, but a lot of businesses, they're trading small to medium, medium to medium, small to small. And so I think there's a broader point. And I think there's just a couple of things that I would say, and then maybe they're obvious, but it's really important that businesses understand that where the power is and test it. And yes, it's difficult. Absolutely, it's difficult. But I can remember a very specific example of an entrepreneur that was saying he was just getting ever more frustrated about late payments. And he said he just had that brainwave where he said, the projects I supply, they cannot start without my product. It's the first bit of the jigsaw. And he said, so from then on, I just tested it and said, I'm not delivering until I've been paid. Done. And okay, that's an extreme example, but I think that testing of where the power is really important. And then the other end of the spectrum, using the financial services products and the digital products that are out there to minimize the impact and to protect yourself.
And I've had examples of that as well. I interviewed an entrepreneur just the other day. She runs a £20 million business. And she said that basically if I work with somebody, they don't pay me on time, I won't work with them again and they lose out.
Yep.
She's a big fan of not burning any bridges, so perhaps she won't beat them with Liz's hopefully bigger and more improved stick. But she makes that decision, the conscious decision. But it's hard, isn't it, when you're getting started to turn down work?
It is very hard, but I have spoken to small businesses who said, I wouldn't do it, I wouldn't push, I wouldn't charge interest, I wouldn't chase my invoices, I was fearful. And I got to that point, like your entrepreneur, where I said, I can't survive if I don't. And the CFO of the company he spoke to said, nobody's ever asked us to pay us quicker, to pay them quicker. So there is something there. You've got to test it and be brave enough to try to do that. Yes, I mean, there are digital answers and solutions that will help. There are financial products that will help. But the other thing for me is talking to the big businesses. I'm saying to them, hang on a minute, how do you think your reputation is and the perception of your reputation is to investors? maybe a big pension fund. You want them to invest in you. It's not going to look good if you don't treat your suppliers well. You're losing the talent. You used the word earlier, talent. The talent sitting in this room drives the success of bigger businesses. You know, and we've really got to be careful. Other people want to work for you if you're a good business to work with. And I think increasingly that is important. And the bigger businesses are they're understanding that. Where we have more of a problem is when the boards can't let the money go and the boards don't give the wherewithal to improve the processes. And I think that's where some of the businesses get stuck.
Emmanuel, you look like you're going to jump out of your seat there. Was there something you wanted to add?
No, I just feel like, you know, as a small business, I feel like what I've had to realise is that we expect payment, but we don't talk about what happens if you don't pay on time. And you know, we're talking about, you know, the software and sending stuff. I've worked with corporates that you send an invoice and that, oh, we don't accept invoices. You have to complete our system. So then that negates the fact of whatever software is available, they don't accept the software. You have to go through their system. And it's really important for you to, you know, take pride in what you do and the service that you offer and say, okay, this is when I expect to get paid. If you don't pay me on time, what are the consequences? And have that conversation up front. I think it's a much better conversation at the beginning than it is once payments are late and now you're scrambling. So I think it's really important to have that conversation up front with the people that you're working with.
I have loads more questions. I just want to take a gauge in the room. Are there any questions from the floor before we carry on? One of my colleagues will come out with a roving mic in a minute. Thank you very much, Latifa. So, but for now, what more can be done in terms of kind of sharing amongst the community, right? So we've obviously got the prompt payment code, and at the Times we've written about some of the big corporates that don't pay on time. They've chosen voluntarily to withdraw from the code. We've talked about this before. But it is also sharing with perhaps your competitors about that corporate that doesn't pay on time, or a public sector client that doesn't pay on time. Is there need for much more transparency?
Yes, there is, but we need to know what we're being transparent about. And this is something that we're talking about within the department at the moment. It's all very well reporting, self-reporting that you pay in 30 days, but what does that actually mean? Are you paying in 30 days or are you waiting 6 weeks to approve and go through an approval process and then accepting the invoice and paying in 30 days? Because that could be quite a long time, you know, or are you paying 30 days end of month? What does receipt of the invoice mean? Because that's when you're supposed to start counting, but lots of people count receipt as being a different thing, receipt by accounts payable. So we need to get the data cleaned up. We need to know what we're measuring, and then we can say, well, you're not a good payer, and you're a really good payer. How did you do it? How did you get there? Come on, guys, you really need to start sharing the information about how you get there. And nobody wants to be the bad person. You know, people in different sectors want to know that they're up there on the league table. So I think that's what we need to look at first, and we need a lot of that data integrity checking.
It comes back actually to a point Ollie made in the break. We were joking about having the late payment awards, because it would be the awards that nobody wanted to win. So, Andrea, does any of that chime with you about kind of a more sharing, transparent culture? Like, if there was one amazing data source which showed us all the great payers and all the terrible payers, wouldn't that be an amazing resource for a business like yours?
Absolutely. I mean, for our business, we can see it. I mean, essentially, we have over 200,000 small businesses on our platform who are accessing finance and accessing cost savings. And yes, we're seeing their tension, their credit tension caused by late payments. So yes, we're always thinking of ways where our community can start to share with each other what's happening in terms of their late payments. And I would tell you, depressingly, I would say the majority of businesses on our platform are experiencing late payments. We ourselves experience it. So I do think that, but there are other tools that we integrate with, and Xero and other accountancy firms, accountancy softwares integrate with, which are credit tools, where you can actually identify the credit robustness of your customers. So you can get information today on the credit strength of of your businesses. So some audience members will have large organizations as their customers, but the majority of us are probably small business to small business, small business to consumer, electricians, plumbers, etc. So some of that is using tools to get paid immediately on the spot, and the rest is, yeah, how are you getting more data on your on your customer to see, are they good for it? And you can get alerts set up in terms of if their credit score is reducing, etc. So I think it's utilizing all of those tools as well if you're really struggling to get paid. And then the last is, don't be afraid to get that letter sent. It's amazing the reaction that you get from people when you say, this is the last letter, this is your final reminder. After that, it's going to basically be a county court judgment. It's amazing the response rate you get from something like that. So I think don't be afraid if you're at that last resort.
Don't be afraid, but come to us first, because we'll save you the cost of the letters and the county court judgment. Please, we may not be able to help, but at least try us out, and we're a free service. Sorry for butting in.
The last resort, I said. The last resort.
But that was a good point on the spot payments, I think, because I received a service recently and the guy was like, we can invoice you or you will save 10% if you pay now. And obviously I paid now. So this is something, there's all these kind of tips and tricks in the toolbox, right, to improve this. Richard, I know you wanted to add something.
Well, I guess it's another one, the other end of the spectrum, and many will know this, but if you've got a good quality book where you've given credit, much like Alex was talking about, thinking about the cost of the finance as an opportunity cost, you can raise money against that asset, release the money, keep trading, and it doesn't stop the late payments, but at least it just eases the pain and allows you to keep trading and use it. And yes, of course, it comes at cost, but consider it whether it's that opportunity cost.
Right, I'm going to come back to you guys. Excellent, we've warmed you up a little bit. There's a guy in the middle here, Latifa, if we can... I'll tell you what, let's start with the lady here to save your legs, Latifa. We'll start with the lady in the front row, and then we'll come to you next. Thank you. If you could just say your name and where you're from.
Yes, good afternoon. My name's Janet Willicott, and I've got an organisation called Normal Like Me, and also just found the Justice Initiative, CIC. We're still quite very small. Probably a question for all of you is how trustworthy are the free platforms? I don't really want to name any names, but the free platforms that connect to your banking system that the accountants use. I mean, are they trustworthy? Are they effective? Or do they use our data and mine it for other ways? Do you know what I mean by that, Alex?
I think it's probably difficult without specifics, but a few general points, perhaps.
I mean, my general point is obviously open banking, open finance. The financial regulators are very, very strict, and most companies would be very careful about falling foul on that. So without knowing any specific examples you're thinking of that may fall out of that, I'd like to think that most businesses would take this very seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Emmanuel, did you want to add something to that?
I think...
It was Andrea. Please, go ahead.
Yes, you could describe my platform as one of those platforms. So I would love to be able to share with you. We're a regulated entity. We are not allowed have those integrations unless we can prove and show you and you consent to the purposes for which your data is being used. Your data is only being used for your own purposes. And we define what those purposes are. And each stage along the way, you consent to that. So for example, if you want to apply for invoice finance to smooth out your cash flows, then you would consent to that being shared with the providers because we've shown you who you're eligible for, and we're showing you the ones not to go for so that you don't get rejected and affect your credit score. So we are essentially intermediating in the middle as your advisor to help you get the right finance at the right price. And that's how we're utilizing the data. The reason for the integrations into platforms like Xero, Sage, etc., is to reduce the friction. Rather than you having to run off and get this information from your accountant, rather than you having to go and download PDFs of your bank statements, etc. All you are doing is consenting to read only access. So, and then you consent to how that data is shared. But as I say, we're regulated. If we ever fall foul, we're no longer allowed to operate in business. And that's just the way the world is moving.
And what I'm hearing there is there's an element of doing your own homework, right, and making sure that they are regulated businesses you're working with.
All I want to say is that the word inertia, Alex, I take umbrage with, because I think it's questions like this going through people's heads at 3:30 in the morning. Which one do I choose? What do I do? How do I know? Who do I find who can help me? And that leads to the doing nothing rather than the inertia.
Super. Right, we had another question just in the middle here. Latifa, if you could just get the mic to this chap here, that would be fantastic. Thank you. If you could pass it along.
Hi, everyone. My name's Tim Weymouth, and I work for Howden, one of the co-sponsors today. And I'd like to add to the conversation, maybe rather than ask a question. One of the areas we specialise in is trade credit insurance. It's not my area of specialism, but that is also refusal to pay. So I've had customers that they work with GE and other big companies, and they just refuse to pay them. And actually having someone like you or Allianz or QBE on your side can be really powerful, keep your business alive. And I think the other point that your colleagues mentioned about asking to pay up front. You know, you don't go into a restaurant and ask to be paid, but everyone assumes you're going to get paid once you've had the meal. But we've had businesses, you know, Penelope's with me today, we've seen businesses that haven't paid us, then gone into administration, and it's cost us a lot. So again, asking how are you going to pay me is, I think it's more than a fair question to ask at the start.
Some useful points there. Thank you very much. And there was one more question on the end and another gentleman here. Let's try and get them both in. Sorry, Latifa. Going to get that step count up today. If we could keep them nice and short and pithy so we can get them both in, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Anton Cole. I'm the founder of the Startup to Scale Up Club, and a plug-in, if I may. We help founders go from startup to scale up for free. And in under 3 years have had over 240,000 people come through this. But going back onto late payments, my last business, I've started a few businesses, most of them monumental failures. The last one was mainly due to late payments. And I really wish I had known more about invoice financing as well as how to protect myself on late payments. Is there any tips or tricks for the businesses that are here, but also further afield, when it comes to how they can better utilize invoice financing, especially when it comes to dealing with the late payments that they haven't received yet?
Richard, is that one for you?
So there's a real range of different invoice finance, and they're called lots of different things, but fundamentally using those debts owed to you as an asset and releasing money. Just a few immediate thoughts. A lot of them will use that checking service to check your clients. So, and I think from my experience, we end up in a lot of arguments with prospective clients when I used to work in that side of finance, sort of arguing, actually take it because they're doing the work for you, they're telling you, so don't try and force the hand of the organisation. They're kind of using their infrastructure because they also have a very big network and they can see what payments have gone through. The other point, as we've said it before, is to try and work the cost of it into your cash flow, to work it through, to make sure that the cost of the finance, because usually there's some sort of fee structure and then there'll be also an interest rate. So there's an expense there, but make sure it's workable and then price it in. If you can't price it in or you can't operate, then it's not the answer, but price it in and make sure your cash flow works. But it's a great tool for the right sort of business.
But for smaller businesses, sometimes it's not an option. And it's not available, and it's too expensive. So, you know...
We'll keep your options open.
A good accountant can help you as well.
Yes.
There we go, as my father would vouch for. I'm afraid we're out of time, sir. We haven't quite got to your question, but I will come and see you afterwards. So thank you to all of you for those really, really interesting answers. To Andrea, thank you for joining us virtually. Richard, thank you very much indeed. To Liz Barclay, Emmanuel and Alex, thank you all for your contributions this afternoon. Thank you.